This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
Momming While Muslim is bringing you yet another retreat. In fact, our retreats have birthed their own name now. Fill Up Your Cup Retreats, or FYKYK. We're kind of proud of that one. Women carry everything for everyone all of the time, and we know we can't pour from an empty cup. So we've curated an FYKYK retreat in Dallas, Texas this February 17th through the 19th at a private retreat center, the theme being introspection in seclusion. See y'all there. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim podcast. You can see me flying solo today because Zeba has COVID for I think it's the 6th time, maybe it's the 5th time. I definitely don't think I'm underestimating that, but please keep her in your prayers because, man, y'all East Coast people, the immunity just stinks. Y'all need some more sun or come out to Phoenix and just stay here. Like, that's what I think. But keep her in your prayers. Let's wish her a speedy recovery because we need to get her to work. Because as you know, the Momming While Muslim retreat in Dallas is coming up. That's probably why her immunity is compromised, because she's working pretty much 24/7 to bring the absolutely best experience to Muslim women and moms who are attending. Day passes are up for sale. So please go ahead, go to our website, hit the 2023 FYKYK Fill Up Your Cup Retreat tab and go ahead and purchase those. I think we have day passes available for Saturday. Check our social media because we're rolling out our guests that are coming. Just kind of letting you know who they are. A lot of them are popular names, so you might recognize them. You'll definitely want to attend. And I think the most important 2 words that are there are halal barbecue. It's Texas, y'all. So of course we had to bring you halal barbecue. We got it. You know the food is going to be off the hook. And this time my chai is going to be served. So I'm super duper excited for the high tea. I wanted to talk a little bit about direct primary care really quickly because I launched a practice last week and I know Zeba was going to ask me questions about it, but I'll just kind of introduce it. Yes, I'm a big HP nerd. And so yes, it's an homage to HP fandom. If you don't know what HP is, that stands for Harry Potter. But FoxMD is direct primary care. And for anybody who doesn't know what direct primary care is, it is when you pay your doctor and you see your doctor when you need your doctor. I know, it's like crazy, easy, stupid, simple medicine so that you don't have to go through insurances and authorizations. For instance, my dad is having chest pain and shortness of breath. So I sent him to the cardiologist. I was like, you had a heart attack a year and a half ago. I think you need to go see the cardiologist. And the cardiologist like, yep, he definitely needs to go back to the lab so that we can go look at his arteries and see if those stents we put in are blocked. Well, we couldn't get a date for a week with his ongoing chest pain and shortness of breath because insurance has to authorize a 78-year-old man, a 75-year-old man with chest pains, shortness of breath. They have to authorize the procedure. So that kind of stuff is why doctors are banding together and saying, this is a load of hooey, and we are not going to participate in this kind of ignorance and neglect. Really, it's medical neglect. So we need to change the system, look up direct primary care. That's everybody's homework. And then we're going to jump right into February because we know you've been waiting all year long for our February series because, so have we. The season of love is upon us. So we're super duper excited. And we don't do February without covering everybody's favorite topic that they are not honest enough or, comfortable enough to admit, which is sex. A completely biased study from May 2022 found that people think about sex 8 times a day. So it's not every 8 seconds. That's a myth, apparently. This study was funded by a company that promotes sex products. So, of course, it's a little bit biased. But 8 times a day is still a lot. Zeba will say that she doesn't even think about it once. But I don't know. I think she's a normal person, except for the whole having COVID 6 times. It's definitely 8 times a day is definitely less than either of us thought. I thought it was at least every hour, but we'll take 8. So this year we're going to cover some of the things that create issues with sex. Our first podcast episode is going to be with one of our favorite guests ever, Muslim sex coach, Dr. Sadaf Lodhi. Dr. Lodhi is a board-certified OBGYN and sex coach for women. She's a doctor of osteopathic medicine from Michigan State University. Yay! I know it's Wolverines, right? But she'll correct me on that if I'm wrong. And she's a certified life and executive coach from Rutgers University. That is where I used to study for the MCAT. She's also had additional training with the Sexuality Counseling and Education Program through the University of Michigan. Welcome, Dr. Sadaf Lodhi.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Uzma. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And actually, Michigan State is Spartans, not
Spartans. Sorry,
University of Michigan are Wolverines. I can just hear like all the Michigan fans. Like,
they're like hating me right now. What did you do?
It's
obviously I'm not from Michigan. Sorry, guys. And my cousins are not football fans or anything, so I don't know. But we are super excited to have you. We like to kick off the podcast always by asking a little bit about your momming story and your momming philosophy, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, my momming story. So I became a first-time mom in 2006, and I have three beautiful boys. And my second son actually was with Clomid. You know, I had a little bit of a hard time. I had a miscarriage, and then I had my second son. I used Clomid, and then my youngest was spontaneous, like happened on its own. And so that's my momming story. And alhamdulillah, they are 12, 14, and 16. And my momming philosophy is that I'm a little strict. I'm a little intense. So I expect things and to be done when they're supposed to be done. And respect is actually a huge thing in our house. And we encourage and make sure that our three boys show respect to not only their parents, but also to each other, and are kind to each other. So those are big things, big values in our house.
I'm so in love with that. And I feel like I just created like 2 more podcast series, or at least 1 podcast series, because the sibling rivalry at my house is insane right now. So we actually had to have a family meeting about you're doing a good job respecting your parents, but you need to do a better job respecting each other. Like that is, and I think regardless of the genders and ages of your kids, that is something that, a lot of moms struggle with. So I love that, you're bringing that to the forefront, but also thank you so much for talking about Clomid, because I don't think a lot of Muslim women that I know are open about any of their infertility struggles. And we do have an infertility series coming up where moms will be coming on to share their stories. But it was so hard to get people recruited to guest for that series, because a lot of people don't want to admit that I had issues. And, I don't know, in your practice, is that a common thing that you see where women are coming and then they feel like maybe their body is not doing something that they think it's supposed to be doing? Like, what is the reason why some women, and this is completely off today's topic, but what are some reasons why women feel like they can't be open about any assistance that they got in pregnancy?
I think, sometimes it's about our thoughts, right? And like, what are our thoughts telling us? And sometimes our thoughts tell us that, well, we should be able to have a baby spontaneously. This is what I'm made for. This is the way my body's supposed to function. And so if I'm not able to have a baby on my own spontaneously, then perhaps I'm a failure. Right? Perhaps my body is a failure and there's something wrong with me. And so if there's something wrong with me, then I'm not going to let other people know that there's something wrong with me, because then I'll be a fraud and, I'll be an imposter. And maybe it's just, I'm not perfect. And maybe other people see me as being perfect, but I'm really not. And so I just don't want to come out as a fraud, but I think a lot of people are ashamed. They're embarrassed, right? That why isn't it happening for me? They walk around, they see other women that are pregnant and it just seems so easy, so simple, right? And why is it that I can't? I mean, being an OBGYN and, I see pregnant women all the time. And I remember when I was struggling and I'd be like, gosh, I see all these women, some of the women do not even want to have these babies, right? And why is it so difficult for me to get pregnant? And, I take care of myself, I eat well, blah, 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 I exercise, why can't I just get pregnant, right? So it's definitely an internal struggle. And I think it has to do with a lot of the thoughts and the things that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. I might clip this out and use it in our infertility series because I think it's really important to hear from a doctor's perspective too. Yeah. Some of the things that you encounter on the other side of the bed, but you've been on both sides of the bed, so you know how it is. Yeah. And as a physician, I know that I struggled with a lot of that guilt and shame too. And I really hated going to baby showers. I actually think I really resented my friends who were easily having kids. I got started late too. Yeah. So it was like, there's so much to catch up on. And I thought like my ovaries burned out. And I was like, this statistically, like I should still be able to do this. I'm still young enough, but it's not happening. Like what's wrong with me was the issue, And it was, like you said, it was my thoughts. And reining those in was really, really difficult. Alhamdulillah, it happened eventually when it was supposed to. But I hope that anybody who hears this knows that it's perfectly normal. It's actually pretty common, right?
Yes, absolutely. I can't tell you the statistics offhand, but yes, it's very common. And we also have to remember, right, that it's not always women. When I was going through residency, we would hear that 40% of infertility was male factor. And in fact, I think now it's 50%. So it's half and half. And so I think that, before women start blaming themselves, they have to understand that there's a whole workup that goes into this, right? It's not just like you're not able to get pregnant. There's something wrong with you and, you need to do something about it. It's no, there has to be workup. And of course, as you know, that if you're over the age of 35 and if you haven't gotten pregnant within 6 months, you need to go see an infertility specialist. Don't just sit around. Don't wait for it to happen. Just go. The sooner you get help, the sooner, hopefully, that you'll be able to conceive.
Inshallah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that tangent because, I'm a nerd. I like it. But tell us a little bit about your inspiration to pursue OBGYN as a specialty and maybe, I'm just giving the initials, maybe spell out what that means for those people who don't know. And then how that kind of snowballed, if you will, into your life as a sex coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, what was really important is that growing up, I didn't really see too many role models for myself in where I grew up. And, I was in the Midwest and, lots of women, were professionals. I just didn't see that many though in my, the community that I grew up in. And I saw, there's one auntie that I can remember specifically, and she was a psychiatrist at the time. And there was one OBGYN that I knew of. And that was really it. I didn't have very many role models. And so in fact, the OB that I knew, she was this amazing woman. And she always told me that, don't do OB.
Yeah.
Which is what I think most people tell women or whoever not to do OB. But, unfortunately for me, I loved OB and, it's, you either hate it or you love it. And I loved it. Mm-hmm. And, what really drew me to OB was, the focus on women's health. I just felt that women, growing up, I felt like women were often in the shadows. They didn't, speak out much. They weren't, definitely just weren't present, enough for me. And I wanted to be a voice for the women that I saw that weren't represented, whether it was in medicine or even in, in this community or the society, whatever. So I wanted to be that voice. And so for me, it was really important to become an OBGYN and be that voice for women.
I love that. That's all like excellent inspiration. And I it's funny because I had the absolute opposite experience where people were like, oh, you have to be OB because there aren't enough Muslim OBs and we don't want our women going to men or non-Muslim women. We want you to take care of them. So that, and then there was the whole religious contingency who was like, it's haram for you to be a doctor if you have to touch men. So you can only do OB or pediatrics. I know. Naturally, I didn't marry into any of those families who said that.
I don't know about that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, Islamically, I don't think there's any grounds for it, but I'm not a scholar. I don't know. I did it. I touch men. And, look at that. I'm committed to my husband and not aroused by any of the 80-year-olds I touch. Look at that. So in any case, how did the OB and this, working with women's health in particular, lead you down the path to sex coaching? Because I didn't know that was a thing until I believe third year of medical school, that sex coaches were a thing. And at that time we called them sex therapists.
Yeah. Well, so, there are sex therapists, right? So there's a sex therapy tract, and there's you can do sex coaching or sex counseling. So those are actually separate things. So, for sex therapists, you have those therapists or psychologists, whatever, that go on and do additional training with a sex education course to become and get certified as sex therapists. The sex coaching and the counseling are for people that are not therapists, but still get that sexual education training. And so then they can become like a coach or a counselor or an educator, which is actually the track that I'm following through the University of Michigan. So because I am a physician, but I'm not a therapist. So that's the distinction there. And the reason why I found that it was, something that I was interested in was because, one, as you know, Uzma, in medical school, we don't get very much training on sex education or sexual health and wellness and things like that. And being a gynecologist myself and having patients come to me and ask me those very personal questions, I just felt that I didn't have the knowledge that I should have to be able to address the situation or the question. And I just wanted to know more. And I felt that in our culture, in the Muslim culture, but specifically with Muslim women, I just felt that we didn't have enough education, right? And I wanted to be the one to empower women and to educate them because already, I'm a gynecologist and they're already coming to me for, with issues of the reproductive tract. And to me, it only made sense that then I add this also into my services that I provide and am able to counsel women not only about their reproductive, tract and things like that, but also about something as intimate and personal as sex and intimacy. And I felt that, if I learned more on that topic, I could make these women feel more comfortable about a topic that they perhaps feel uncomfortable about.
Yeah. Yeah. And outside of very nuanced, sexually ambiguous jokes that aunties sometimes would they would share with each other in our presence. It was, as a kid, I'm I didn't understand it. Now as an adult looking back, it's oh, they were dirty aunties talking about that stuff, but they were talking about it, but not talking about it at the same time. And then humorously. But when I look back, it's no, that was pathology that somebody needed to address. Yeah. I wonder if they ever talked to a doctor about it. And the likelihood is that no, because they didn't have doctors that they trusted. And probably doctors weren't trained at the time. I had exactly 3 hours in sex therapy training in my entire medical career. And that was that third year of medical school, where half the time, because the Muslim guy sat in the front and the Muslim girl sat in the back, and we just all tried not to make eye contact for 3 hours. It was interesting, to say the least. But I wish we could have done better for ourselves and for our patients. So I'm glad that you're on that track. So in your experience as a sex coach, what are some of the most common hangups? Let's say 3 most common hangups about sex that Muslim women in particular have.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of the questions that I get from women in general, not even just Muslim women, right? But it's just women in general, is that they experience decreased arousal, decreased libido, right? They often find sex to be a chore. Something that they're really not interested in. And I think also they have a lot of issues with body image, right? And spectatoring and really not being in the moment because they're really not enjoying what it is that they're doing. And I think one of the famous quotes that I have heard and I absolutely love is Emily Nagoski, who she said once that to have sex is to have, let me actually, I'm going to pull this up because
Yeah, sure. Go
I
look
think it's
it up.
actually, oh, here we go. So it's to want sex is to have sex worth wanting, right? So it's hard to want something that you don't even enjoy, that you're not finding pleasure
Right.
in. And so I think that that is oftentimes what women come to me for, is that the decreased libido, is the decreased arousal. And, why are they just not interested? And it's something that their husband wants, but it's something that they don't want. And they just, and they think that it's an easy fix, right? They think like, well, maybe if there's just some medication that I can get, maybe if there's something that I can do that doesn't really require any time, then it'll be fine. And, my relationship will be fine. And then I can just move on. Again, it's like a chore, right? It's just something to check off their to-do list. And then once it's done, it's done. And it's not something that they really experience.
That is very interesting. So you're saying there's decreased arousal, there's negative body image. Was there like maybe a third one that you also see?
Yes. And let me see here. So, I think that, so we said decrease arousal, decrease libido, right? And feeling, oftentimes, they feel like sex is dirty or shameful, and so they don't feel comfortable with their bodies. And I think it's also a lot that the sex negativity, right? So having grown up with something like that, I think that that also affects how we feel about sex. And I think that is actually something that I really focus on, is about the mindset. And it's about, how do you feel when you hear the word sex, right? Where does it show up in your body? Some people, will tense up. And so then you have to kind of get to the root of that and figure out like, well, why does that happen for you? Perhaps people have experienced trauma, right? Some people have experienced abuse. And so that's where the therapists come into play. And that's where it's really important that women work through the issues or the traumas of the past so that they can move forward.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful segue, because my next question was going to be, what is the cultural baggage that leads to such negative thoughts about sex for Muslims in particular, because you are the Muslim sex coach? You get a lot of interesting comments sometimes, I'm sure, on your DMs and in the comments on your social media accounts. So is there anything that kind of is something that comes over and over again as people react to some of the content that you're producing that's sex positive?
Yeah. So, oftentimes what I will get is that, of course, it's the trolls on social media, but that's okay. That's what makes it fun.
You can say trolls. You can call them whatever you want. Like I do.
But that's what makes it stronger, right? But anyway,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
right. So oftentimes, people will be like, well, where's your, haya? Where's the modesty in this? You shouldn't be speaking about this openly. And so, my response to that is that there's nothing explicit, right? There's nothing, we're not talking about a specific position. We're not talking about a specific act, right? These things are in generalities. And the reason why is because in Islam, it is encouraged. You can talk about these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. And, the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was very open about sex and intimacy, and nothing, again, it's nothing that's going to be vulgar or obscene, but it's going to be something that normalizes the conversation. And that's really what my aim is, especially on social media, right? Is to decrease the stigma that is around sex so that we can perhaps change from a culture that is very sex negative to something that is sex positive, or even at least just neutral, right? And unbiased. We don't have to project our negativity onto our friends or onto our children, because then the cycle just continues, and then they have that sex negativity. And then, will it ever change where we can become a society that is very sex positive and actually embrace our own roots, right? Islam is a very sex positive religion. And to be honest, when I learned that myself, it just blew my mind. I had no idea. And I think that for me, it actually gave me permission, right? So we are always, I think, especially as women, and especially, as people pleasers, we are always seeking permission, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And I think for me, learning that in Islam, because I am actually a very religious person, I know I'm not wearing a hijab. That's always the next question on the TikTok and whatever, what is your hijab, right?
Okay.
But the thing is that for me, it was really important to know that Islam is a sex positive religion, and that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, encouraged us to learn about it, and that women have sexual rights in Islam, and that, the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, encouraged men to always, give women their rights and fulfill, and give them sexual pleasure. Right. And also a woman can, and this as well as I do, that a woman can actually, have a divorce if she's not sexually pleased in the bedroom. So, all of these things showed to me that women have all these rights in Islam, and yet, we're not taught, at least in some cultures. I was never taught that women actually had sexual rights. I didn't know that. So I think that the more we learn, then the more we give ourselves permission to learn.
Yeah. And as a nod to the way that we grew up, it's that one hadith, right? Like if you say no to your husband, the angels will curse you all night. And it's like, no, it's also if the husband says no to the wife, the angels will curse him too. It's not a one-way street, because Allah's always just, always fair. Some people were raised around those environments. Like, hey, this is one of the duties that you're going to have as wife and mother, and you better be ready to fulfill it. Like, you're going to cook and you're going to clean and you're going to serve him in all ways, shapes, and forms with your body and your person. And I think a lot of that is that those toxic cultural instructions and just norms, they pervade generations of our women. And it really is up to us to break what I consider trauma. I think all of that was traumatic to hear. Like, I was literally introducing my daughter to Bollywood, because my daughter's 11 years old and she has no relationship with Bollywood. I'm so proud of that. So I was like, showing it to her, and she was having such a hard time because, of course it's a whole different culture and religion, but for South Asians, that culture is not so far from the way that men are viewed as like everything. Like, my job is to serve him. And, in very Orthodox Hindu culture, like, your husband is a god. Mm-hmm. And she was having such trouble, not only as a Muslim wrapping her brain around that, but also as a woman. She, because she is a young woman, and she's just like, I don't even understand. This is garbage. Like, she needs to divorce him. Like, what is she talking? What is that? What is happening here? I'm like, yay, I did my job, So it was like and I sounded stupid trying to explain that culture to her. I was like, this is how we grew up. And she's like, well, this is dumb. And I was like, that's because I taught you that it's dumb. So you're welcome. Yeah, exactly. You're very welcome. Exactly, right? So on that note, you're talking about we need to create, work towards having that generation of sex positivity. Inshallah, one day we'll have it. But in the meantime, how do we communicate about sex to our growing kids when, it's like you want to be sex positive, but I think the worry that a lot of parents have is, well, I don't want to make it seem like it's this wonderful thing that they should all experience and go out and do like now, because, if you tell kids something so fun, they're going to want to do it right now. How do I make it sex positive without encouraging them to have sex prematurely? How can we be sex neutral?
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think my philosophy is that if you talk about it, if you tell somebody about it, I don't think that they're going to run out and do it. I really don't. So I think that the way that we become sex positive is that we have to examine our own thoughts, right? I think we start from that. We have to examine our own thoughts, and then, how do we feel about sex? And if it's very negative, then, how are those thoughts serving us? If they're serving us, great. If they're not, then how can we change that, right? So we ourselves have to become sex positive, or else, at least be neutral about it. And so then, we can then talk to our children about it. But then also, I think what needs to happen is that I think we need to talk to our children about just the phases of life, right? And what happens, and about puberty, and speak about it with a sense of awe, right? Because that's what it is. It's amazing, right? That you have this little baby first, that we start out from like, an egg and a sperm. And then, I mean, it's just really like, subhanAllah, like really just like, I feel like, Surah Rahman, right? Like, and which of these
Which of the
right,
favors
favors
of
do
your
you
Lord we
deny,
deny?
right?
Yeah.
So it's just, you start out from like this egg and this sperm, and then it grows up to like a fetus, and then the baby is where, and then all the changes that happens, right? And then the baby grows up and this and that. And I think that if we describe it as that, I think then it's more of like a miracle, right? It's instead of something that is perhaps risky or, negative or dirty or shameful, it becomes something that's very beautiful. And I think that if we can teach that to our children, hopefully they'll see it as something very beautiful and something very precious. And then I think that we can change that idea of, that sex negativity to sex positivity. Also, I think that it's so important to pathologize it, right? Like it's not something bad. It's something good that happens to us. And also, I don't know if you ever saw this movie, but I remember seeing this movie a long time ago. It's called Interview with a Vampire with Tom Cruise.
I saw bits of it, but I wasn't allowed to watch it because it was like,
Yeah.
oh, too
Yeah,
sexy
it
for
is.
kids.
It
Yeah.
was. I didn't watch the whole thing of it, but I just remember like one small piece of the movie, and it was about where like this girl is having a conversation with, Tom Cruise, and she's saying to him, she is watching an older woman, do her hair and whatever, and he asks her what she's looking at, and she says, I'm just watching this woman, and she's older because this little girl became a vampire, and so she would never change.
She'd never
Right, and
age.
she'd
Yeah.
never age. And so, and she was just admiring the beauty of it. So I think that if we explain to our children that just the beauty of the process of just, going from, adolescence to teenage to adulthood and what happens, and then the responsibilities that also come with it, right? So it's not just sex, and it's not always, it's not just all fun, which it can be, and hopefully it will be for somebody, once they're married.
Inshallah.
In the context of marriage, of course, that's what we always talk about with in Islam and intercourse. But is also the responsibility that comes with that as well, right? I mean, just that I'm an OBGYN, and just recently this past week I did a postpartum visit on a girl that was 15.
Oh man.
And so she still has the rest of her life to live, and yet now she has this little baby. So I think that, we start with our own thoughts and our own attitudes regarding sex, and then, teach our children in the best possible way that we can.
Yeah, yeah. And what I found recently was really important. I did not know that my 14-year-old did not know. But I was like, he was like, what? You have to have a period to have a baby? And I'm like, yeah, once a woman has a period, that's when she can get pregnant. And he was like, he was thinking on his sister, like, oh man, so she got pregnant, but she's only this old. And I'm like, yeah, and in some places that happens to girls who are not physically, emotionally, mentally ready for that. And I was leading it back to him, like, that's why you need to be careful, because everybody on your high school campus can get pregnant. So that's why nobody should be messing around with each other. He's like, yeah, no. I never want to do that. But like his concern was for his sister, and at the same time, like his knowledge is increasing, like, oh, you have to have a period to get pregnant. And it's shocking to me every time that that's not general knowledge for teenagers. Yes. Like they don't know that, puberty means now pregnancy is possible. And I think it's equally important for the unaffected gender, the males in our lives, like you're a mom of boys, for them to understand that, yeah, you could end up messing up somebody's life, just like somebody could mess up your sister's life. So remember that responsibility goes both ways. It's a societal responsibility. And as parents, for us to explain not just the biology, but the consequences of biology, I think is really, really important. And I think that can be done neutrally and very sterilely. So I like to keep it really clinical at our kitchen table, or like this was on a car drive and my son was just like I could feel the steam coming out of his ears. Like, wow, like my mind just blew open. I'm like feeling really good about it. To keep those lines of communication open, and consequences, I think natural consequences, not if you do this, like, you're going to ruin your life, or, you know, if you have sex, like, you know, this could happen, and, you know, the rest of your life is ruined. Like, don't make it so catastrophic, like, because then they're going to be too scared to come talk to you about it, and they're going to go get their information from somebody else. And that's not what we want. So let's take this back. You're talking about like this beautiful development and the miracle of development. And I want to not just talk about like our teenagers. I want to talk about us as Muslim women and moms. What are some of the changes with aging that you think lend to better or worse sex? Because it could go either way as we're, you know, coming into our sexual, I think, epiphany in our later years.
Yeah. So I think that that's, you know, a really great question, because there are definitely lots of pros and a few cons, but definitely more pros. I think that what happens is that, you know, as we get older, so as Muslim women, most Muslim women, you know, have not had any sexual experience outside of marriage. Right. And so I think that in our early years, we're all learning. And then as we get older, I think we become more confident. We know what we like, we know what we don't like. We know what we want. And I think that that confidence actually leads to a better sex life, because, you know, we are not willing to put up with things that we don't want to do or things that are not pleasurable to us. Right. And so I think that confidence is what becomes better as we get older in life. The things, of course, you know, as we do age, things change, our bodies change, you know, perhaps we're not as fit as we used to be when we were younger. Perhaps things start to sag a little bit and things like that. I think our body image, right? So I think those are the thoughts that often come into our head is, you know, perhaps we don't view ourselves as attractive as we once were or something like that. So I think that body image, you know, plays a big part. And I think that also what happens is that once we start going through perimenopause and then hit menopause, right? The changes that happen at that time. So then we start to notice that we, you know, perhaps have vaginal dryness, or perhaps there's pain within intercourse, or perhaps that, you know, you have difficulty becoming aroused, or perhaps there's, you know, decrease in lubrication or things like that. So I think that, you know, perhaps women also get, you know, recurrent UTIs, right? So that can also be a problem. You get hot flashes, you get night sweats. And so those are all the things that can happen with a decreasing estrogen in our body. And so, but, you know, the great news is that there are solutions, right? So we don't have to live with the pain. We don't have to live with the, you know, say that a woman is getting recurrent UTIs. You can get vaginal estrogen, which can help plump up that tissue in the vagina, and so that you're not having that pain with intercourse. And if you are, then you're using lubrication, right? And that there's no shame in using lubrication, and that just because, you know, you may be aroused, but then you may not be lubricated. So then you just use a lubricant, right? So there is a solution to the problems that may arise as we age, but that we know that we can always reach out to a gynecologist or a family doctor or somebody and get the help that we need. And vaginal estrogen is very good. And, you know, a lot more people are talking about vaginal estrogen and using it throughout. And there are vaginal estrogen, because it acts locally to the surrounding tissue, there's very low systemic effects, right, throughout the whole body. And so typically for most women, it is very safe to use that estrogen.
Yeah. And in my practice, that's what I've always used, because most of the women that I encounter are very hesitant to take systemic hormone replacement therapy. So I'm like, yeah, but your life is compromised and your husband is here with you saying that y'all collectively need to do something about this because he's not happy, you know, and you're not happy because he's not happy. Like, this is affecting so many other dynamics in your relationship and at this point in your life where you no longer have the responsibility necessarily of raising kids, the physical work of motherhood and fatherhood that you have. Like, this should be your time, you know, together to reconnect, like to really like each other and just be free. And what's holding you back is some of these physical changes that accompany aging. It's completely treatable. It doesn't have to be systemic. It doesn't have to be permanent. It can be something. So typically, like, I'll cycle. I'll be like, okay, use it for 7 days on, 7 days off kind of thing. Because, I mean, nobody's having sex every single day. I haven't encountered that couple yet. I don't know if you have. but I'll make modifications based on what they're requesting and based on their concerns. And it's all doable, but a common question that people have is, who do I ask for help? And I'm glad that you mentioned your primary care physician or your OBGYN would be perfect places to start. Not Cosmo, not TikTok, definitely not your girlfriend down the street, not your mom,
Absolutely.
So we're talking about, troubleshooting some of those physical issues, but going back to the bigger, more abstract concept of how do we help Muslim women overcome some of their hesitations around sexual agency, around having that voice that you were talking about in the beginning. That was your inspiration to be an OBGYN in the first place.
Yeah. So I think that that's where, the coaching comes in. And so I think, so what I do is I actually have a 4-step process that I use when I'm working with women. And again, it always starts with their thoughts. And when they hear sex, where do they, where does that show up for them? How do they respond? What do they think of? And then I start from there. So it's always talking about the mindset, because that's where, so the biggest sexual organ that we have, right, is our brain. So if our brain is not into what we're hoping to achieve, if it's not in line with what we believe, then we're really not going to do it. And we are not going to make the changes that will make that result possible, right? So first we have to work on mindset. So that's where I start. And then once we talk about mindset, then we also talk about the female anatomy, because, you'd be surprised. And I know, that you and I are physicians. So, perhaps you wouldn't be surprised actually is, sometimes patients do not know or even understand their own bodies. I literally just, again, this past week had a patient say to me that, she had a bladder infection. She thought she had a bladder infection. It was hurting when she was peeing, and that she knew for sure there was something wrong with her vagina because she was having problems when she peed. So as you and I know, and hopefully most of your listeners and viewers know, that, women have 3 holes in their vulvar region. In their external genitalia, we have the urethra where we pee from. We have the vagina where, people can have intercourse and babies come out of. And then we have the rectum where poop comes out of. But this patient, unfortunately didn't know that where she urinated from was also different from where, babies came out of. So,
her menstrual flow came
correct,
from. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So that being said, I go over the mindset, then we go over the anatomy so that everyone's on the same playing field here, and that we understand, and we go over erogenous areas and zones, and we go over orgasm and things like that. And then the next module is talking about Islam, right? And talking about giving yourself permission and going over what the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Quran say about sex and intimacy. Because like myself, I'm thinking that a lot of women don't know that women have a right to sexual pleasure in Islam. And that right was given to us over 1400 years ago. And only recently has the WHO included sexual pleasure in their definition of what comprehensive sexual education should be. So just knowing that should give us agency, right? Should give us the permission that we need, perhaps that we are seeking, to find out and learn about sex and sexual pleasure and, the things that we like, the things that we don't like. And then the last module that I go over is the way forward, right? So that now that we have all this information, now that we know, where do we go from here? How can we incorporate what we just learned into our daily lives and move forward with ourselves and with our spouse?
So that's your 4-pronged approach to reestablishing our sexual agency. And I think that is beautiful and simple. And I'm so glad it's only 4 steps, and it all sounds really doable. Yes, so really excited about that. And as a nod to your anatomy lesson, that was the conversation that my daughter and I had in the car earlier this week, where she was like, wait, there's 3 holes. And I was like, oh crap, mom has not done a good job. I thought we did this on the diagram. Let's do it again in the car. So I'm like this with her in the car driving and doing this. And she was like, oh, okay. All right. Now I get it. So, it's something that constantly, I think, just needs to be reviewed until inshallah, by the time they're adults, they're going to get it, you know, so that they're going to be able to go to their doctor and say, it's burning when I pee, like, it's not my vagina. They shouldn't be saying that to their doctor. So it's okay if you do, you know, because I'm sure you educated that patient as well. I'm glad that she had you to go to. So this was all super enlightening. I know like a lot of people benefited from this, and inshallah, they're going to find your links in our show notes to go look up how to find you as a coach, to go to your social media and learn from you over there, because you have a lot of good content that's educational as well as entertaining. I think they're going to get a kick out of it. But what we like to close with is a rapid fire to help our audience kind of get to know you better. So it has nothing to do, well, not necessarily has anything to do with what we talked about today, but I think it's a lot of fun. We like to put 90 seconds on the clock. There are no rules except you say the first thing that comes to the top of your head. There's no right answer. The right answer is whatever like you think of immediately. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start the stopwatch if I can figure out how to do this again. Something's wrong with my stopwatch, but okay. So we'll start with the first question we always ask our audience members is, what book are you reading right now?
I am reading the 14 Ways to Grow. It's like a self-help.
Ways to Grow.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a self-help book. So
love it. We all need more of that for sure. So you're a doctor now, you practice OBGYN, and you're the Muslim sex coach, but what was your first job?
My first job that I ever had, I was a physical therapy assistant. So I helped in a nursing home. Yep. And I helped patients with their physical therapy and bringing them to their services and stuff like that. So yeah.
Oh, that makes my heart so happy. You know, geriatrics. Yeah. Old people. How old were you when you had that job?
I was in my first year of undergrad. So maybe like 18, 17.
18. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So we talked a lot about sex today because that's the subject for today. We could talk about it until we're blue in the face, you and I know. But what's one subject that you would be glad to never speak about again?
Never speak about again. Donald Trump.
Good answer. I love it. Enough said. Mic drop. What's your most common impulse buy? Is there like a category of things that you're like, gotta have it, gotta buy it?
Cashmere sweaters.
That isn't, wow. Yes, you have beautiful sweaters all the time. Why didn't I think of that? Okay. Very nice. What's the worst thing you've ever eaten at a restaurant?
The worst thing, I don't know. Sometimes, so this is what always happens. I always order something that I don't like. And my husband, then what he does is he says to me, he goes, okay, what is the second thing that you would order if you wanted to order? So then he orders the second thing. And then inevitably, I don't like my first thing. And so then he switches meals with me. He's a good husband. He switches meals with me so that I can have my second choice, and he eats something that I don't like.
Like he knows you that well. What's your second choice? Right. That's amazing. Yeah, he's definitely a keeper. Yeah. I like this question. It's a new one. If your life was a story, what would it be titled?
Ooh. That is a good
This one. Is good for the Dr. Sadaf Lodhi book that you're going to write.
Yes, it is. It's going to be called Give Yourself Permission.
I love it. That is copyrighted officially. Nobody can take that. Yep. And I think that's a perfect way to close this episode of the podcast. Everybody, Give Yourself Permission by Dr. Sadaf Lodhi. Pre-order that at Barnes & Noble today.
I love it.
Mommyingwhilemuslim is bringing you yet another retreat. In fact, our retreats have birthed their own name now. Fill Up Your Cup Retreats, or FYKYK. We're kind of proud of that one. Women carry everything for everyone all of the time, and we know we can't pour from an empty cup. So we've curated an FYKYK retreat in Dallas, Texas this February 17th through the 19th at a private retreat center, the theme being introspection in seclusion. See y'all there.